is in your hands. My life is in your hands. You took control when I was young, when I was not able. My life is in your hands. My life is in your hands. You took control when I was young, when I was not able.
Hi, welcome to my show called Inspired Blessings with Jean Marie Prince. And I just want to thank you so much today for joining us. And today my guest is Ken Auerbach, and he's a lawyer and also the co-chairman of the Brookhaven Town Conservative Committee. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Now, on the other hand, too, is that your wife, Lauren, I went to elementary school with her, right?
That's what I just found out about a month ago. Didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's funny how sometimes the world gets a little bit smaller. Now,
True.
were you always, or not always, but when did you get involved as being the co-chairman of the Brookhaven?
I got involved with it about 8 years ago, doing that, but I've been involved in the political process since approximately 1992.
Now, what's the reason why? I mean, it's not like somebody says, you know, I'm just going to run for, going to the political party. What made you?
Well, I'd been involved with it for years. I got involved with it originally because a friend just asked me if I would register with the Conservative Party, and I said I would. And then I sort of got involved with it and realized that the platform of the party was really something that I believed in, and the older I get, the more I believe in some of the fundamentals of the party. So about 8 years ago, I decided that I wanted to make a difference within my community, and we weren't happy with the way things were being done within our community and within the Conservative Committee, and we felt that we needed to make a change so that we could have it run in a way that would be honoring to God. Okay,
now, let's say, for instance, some people don't understand what conservative party is. Is it Republicans, Democrats? Can you just break it down a little
Sure.
fast?
In New York State, there are minor parties. What does that mean? It just means that there's parties in addition to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. The Conservative Party was started in 1962, and there are certain fundamentals within its written platform. Some of the fundamentals within the platform are and include protection of the unborn and their right and their inviolate right to have life. Also, we support very much prayer in schools and prayer in public settings. We support marriage as God defines it. And those are some of the basic principles.
Well, that almost sounds like you would say it's more like a Christian conservative group, would you say? It's based on the foundation of the Bible?
Well, what I would say is that our country was started on Judeo-Christian principles.
Yes, it was.
And that underlies all of our laws. So I would say that I believe that the Conservative Party within its platform has been most steadfast staying to that, whereas the other parties over the years have allowed really the fundamentals of what formed our government and this great country in the first place to sort of evaporate. And I think the Conservative Party at least is still fighting for a lot of those principles that really made our country great.
Right, I know, and right now we're losing the platform of having God as really the foundation in our country, and that's why it's a crazy world right now. It is so crazy. I was listening to something where the gentleman was sharing that church and state, it's really not in the Bill of Rights. It's not set in, it's not even in the Constitution, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this. The reality is that separation of church and state never meant in any way that the church and Judeo-Christian principles is supposed to be out of our country and out of the rights. It's actually supposed to be fundamentally part of it. It was supposed to be, and what it meant was that the state was supposed to stay out of the church. and the state wasn't supposed to impose a state-imposed religion, which we all agree on. But it did not mean at any point that the fundamentals of this country, in terms of relying upon Judeo-Christian principles, were going to be eliminated. And what's happened is it's been so perverted that the very thing that formulated the basis for our country now is looked at as something almost as a curse word. And the outrageous part about that is that the laws that we have, if you take a look at the laws, most of them are biblically based. You can actually look at definitions for manslaughter, for murder. You look at malice aforethought. Those are right within the Bible. So the problem that we're running into is that we keep on allowing the evaporation of the Judeo-Christian principles, and ultimately we look back and we forget where we started. And that's the real problem. And that's the place where political involvement is so incredibly necessary for people of faith, and that's why I am involved.
I also understand that, Kim Davis, okay, that she did not want to sign off for gay marriages. And so she was put in jail for it. If the state would have done something differently, okay, I was listening to Larry Nichols. Are you familiar? There's a video called, The Plan to Save America, and where he talks about what happened was that what they should have done was the state of, where was it, Tennessee? I forget where she was had that situation.
It's down in, I think, Alabama, I think.
All right, the state that she was in is that the governor should not have allowed the federal to come into play, okay, because that the state has, that they can stand for their own grounds. And so they, shouldn't have allowed the federal government to get involved in that decision making, right?
Yeah, I mean, the problem was this. The problem is that most of the states in this country, and I think there was 26 states, as I recall, had passed legislation that said that marriage was defined as a marriage as biblically stated, which is between a man and a woman. The states had voted on that. The people of those states had voted on it. In fact, in the state where I believe Kim Davis resided and was elected, it was something like 75% of the people within that state voted that they wanted the law to be that. So what the real problem is when the courts get involved and interrupt the division between states' rights and federal rights, which was never intended to be. I can tell you that there's no question in my mind, if our forefathers and the founders of this country knew that the federal government was going to impede and step in the way of states' rights on an issue where they voted 75 to 25, we never would have become the United States of America. There would have been no chance.
Right.
So it's turned upside down. So then she was left in a situation where most of the people in her state, or the great majority of the people in her state, believed that it was offensive and it was wrong in terms of what the Bible said. And she then had already been elected now to a position where she was certainly required to uphold the law,
Right.
but the law as stated was something that the people within her state had voted quite differently. So what you wound up with is her having a no-win situation. If she enforced a federal law that doesn't exist, she now violates her conscience as to not only what she believes biblically is correct, but she violates her conscience too as to the people who had actually elected her.
Right. I don't know. It's just, I just feel, what is it, in the end times, in the Bible it says is what's wrong is right and right is wrong.
Yeah.
So how corrupt is our government?
Well, my feeling is actually the whole process is corrupted at its roots. And what I mean by that is the average person who is not involved in this process, they know there's something wrong and they've been turned off by it, but they can't quite explain it or the details of it. And the reality is that I can say that it is corrupted foundationally. And the problem is that when you take the power from the people, then you've now created a situation where you have emperors. And the reality is that our country was formulated originally to remove kings and people that were monarchs. And what people don't realize is the place where it has to change, and the most important place, is to change the political system, the system that actually puts these people in place. And if I could explain for a moment how to do that.
Yes.
In the state of New York, as an example, each of these different parties, and we talked about before, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, there's a Conservative Party, and there's a couple of other minor parties. The Conservative Party actually, in Suffolk County here alone, has 22,000 registered members of the Conservative Party. The issue becomes is, how do you make sure that those people are actually getting their voice heard on the issues that are important, versus a few political leaders, a few people with power? And the problem is the system right now has failed. It's not only failed in the Conservative Party, it's failed straight across the board. And there's a way to solve this. The average person doesn't know this. I would say if I went in a room and I had typically 10,000 people in the room, one person might know. The way that it could be solved and the way it could be fixed is that the individual political executive committees, and those are the ones that get to decide who gets to run on the line, whether it's the Democratic line, the Republican line, the Conservative line. Those are the people deciding it. So it's a small group of people that get elected every 2 years. In Brookhaven Town, there's 27 of us. And when I first got involved and took over as co-chairman of the party in the town, the chairman had something like 8 votes on an issue, and everybody else had maybe 1 or 2. And I looked at it and I said, this is outrageous. There's no possible way that you can have democracy here, because ultimately what would happen would be, if I wanted a vote on something out of the 27 people, I got 8 votes. So let's face it, I would get my way every single time. That's the problem. So we changed it in Brookhaven Town. Everybody in our town on our executive committee has one vote, period. 1 vote each person, and you know what? Maybe there's a vote and there's 27 people, and maybe 14 people disagree with me. It is possible that someone might have a better idea than I have. So the problem is there. That's right where the problem is. And what I would urge, I would urge that every single party, and not only in our town, but right throughout the county, right throughout the state, that there be legislation passed. The courts have typically tried to stay out of internal party politics, they call it, or rules. But there is no question in my mind that statutes and laws could be passed that require the political parties to have a fair process of having people representing their communities. So if it said all of these committees have to have it, that each person has 1 vote. If it's said on a county level committee that the county level committee has to be represented in proportion to the registration within each town of the registrants of that party. Right now, as an example, in Suffolk County, the Conservative Committee has people elected on the executive committee, but it's not proportionate. So what happens is you have a county chairman who decides, you know what, I want to control this whole thing, so I'll put 40% or whatever the percentage is of Islip Town, since that's where I'm from, and a town such as Brookhaven, which has far more people, have less. So it's fundamentally corrupted. And there is a way to change it. And my view of it, and my goal ultimately in this process, is I want to hand something over to our children that we could be proud of, that represents and resembles what the founders of our country went ahead and fought for, and what every other veteran has fought for over the years.
And so can you give us an example?
Sure. The way I would do it is I would have a county committee. Now, the county committee of each party, they decide who runs in the county races.
Right.
And I would require that under the law, and we're not even going to need the law to change in our case, because we're going to change it on our own. All right? But I would hope that the laws do change to allow for it. So what would happen would be, is on the county level, all of those executive committees that are voting as to who runs in the county races, they're going to be required to have proportionate representation based upon what the registration is within the towns. So if the Conservative Party has 30% in Brookhaven Town, 30% on the county executive committee of the Conservative Party has to come from Brookhaven Town. That should be like that for every party.
Right.
And ultimately what will happen is if we have that like that, there'll be a representative government. I would also require that even on that county level and the town level, every single one of those committees are no longer going to be able to allow a chairman to have 6 votes or 8 votes or 10 votes. There's going to be one person, one vote. And you'll be amazed when you change it like that, and when we did it in our town, how much more people want to be involved in it, how it becomes the republic that it's supposed to be. So the average person doesn't understand that it's so corrupted at the bottom that what you're feeding into the governmental process is a corrupted process.
Right.
So it's the way to change it, and it can be done, and we're going to do it. We've done it in Brookhaven, and we intend that it's going to be like that in every single one of the other towns.
Well, I'm participating in it myself.
Yes, and
Right.
and we're blessed that blessed to have you.
And when I was actually looking at it, realizing I signed it, I was thinking, oh, what am I running for? You know, so explain that, and really, it's not that much involvement as you would think.
No, I mean, basically what happens is every 2 years, there's people who we circulate petitions for. Think of the county as a big grid. And if you divide it up, you would have an election district. So when you go to vote, you see ED, whatever the number is. And each town has a certain number of election districts.
Right.
Each person every 2 years is able to, any person could run for committee person. They get a certain number of signatures. It's a couple of signatures. They get to run. And then they get to come, when elected, if they get elected, they get to come to one meeting every 2 years, and they get to vote and decide these rules. The rules of it should be one person, one vote. The rules are of it should be proportionate representation on a county level. The rules are that we're going to have a government which is based upon the principles of our country and where our country started. So what I'm really trying to say to people is, okay, it's time for you to take your government back. Right now, I believe strongly in the Conservative Party principles because I believe they're biblically based,
Right.
okay? But even if you didn't want to be a member of the Conservative Party, the reality is that these other political committees have the same problem. So you're not really getting a choice. You go to vote. When you go to vote, it's already been picked by 1 or 2 people. It's really a party leader who's picked that person, and everybody else follows it. Okay.
Yeah, it's more like, okay, who you know.
Absolutely.
It just seems so unfair, and that's why people don't even want to vote these days.
Absolutely.
How would they get in touch with you to be able to do what you're saying?
Well, basically what they can do is they can email me. I'll give you an email. They can email me at myabba728@aol.com. It's myabba728@aol.com. If they're a member of the Conservative Party right now, we're excited because we have so many people who are so excited about being involved in the process. And what I'm telling people is, okay, it's time. We're going to turn it over from a few to many.
Yeah, because I'll tell you this, is that America as we used to know it isn't really it. And honestly, I don't know if the politicians that are in the high office are even Christians and really following the Christian values, or even want to follow the Christian values. Because there's so many things that I've heard and read that seems to be that it isn't that way.
Well, we're in a fight, and I think everybody, people of faith, I have to tell you, have to step up, okay? You've given the ground to the enemy.
Right.
Okay, you've given the ground to the enemy, and if you want to fight and step up, okay, I'm prepared to go ahead and tell you and teach you how to do it. I'm not prepared to do it because I need to do it for myself. I do believe that the process can be good, and we should be a republic, but it's not a republic. It's run by a few little power brokers, and we can change that almost instantaneously. And we're going to start with the Conservative Party, and then by God's grace, my prayer would be is that the other parties will feel the need to follow it, because they're going to, at the very least, be embarrassed by the process of the way it's being done, and hopefully, at most, I would hope, that we could actually have laws in place that are going to require this. So we'll never get in this spot again.
Right. Well, you know, I hear about Texas and how Texas really stands up for their state and for their people, and in which they'll fight. They will fight and stand. And I think what's happening is that a lot of states in the U.S. aren't fighting. They're letting the federal government get involved when they should be making the stand and taking the stand.
I mean, I agree with that very much. I think one of the things that I'm quite concerned about, though, is I got to tell you, people of faith, you really have to look at what the party, if you're registered to a party, what that party stands for.
Right.
It's not good enough just to go around like a sheep being led to the slaughter. And the reality is, okay, if we're told, okay, the Bible that we read, it's the same today, tomorrow, and it'll be the same, it was the same yesterday. The Bible is clear. That life is inviolate, okay? The Bible's clear. God knew us before we were in our mother's womb.
Right.
So if you're going to follow a platform of a party,
You got to know what they're.
you need to know what it says. And if it doesn't protect the unborn, there is no excuse to support people running on a particular party. Now, what I will tell you is this: if you're willing to come out and say, and that person in office is willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm in this party because I believe in this, but all these other things are wrong. That's one thing. But don't make the mistake, and I've heard people say this, well, those aren't local issues, okay? That's a cop-out, because when you elect somebody in a political party, they get name recognition. And when they get name recognition, they start moving their way up. I think it's something like 97% of the people, incumbents who have been elected, keep on getting elected. So if you, a person of faith, abrogates and doesn't go ahead and makes your responsibility to make sure the people that are running for office are people that have biblical values, then you're going to have to answer for that, just like I have to answer for all the mistakes that I make, okay? And I think what's critical here is that the God that we serve, okay, tells us how we're supposed to live. And if we are willing to do that and fight for that, okay, then we can have a place that you're going to start seeing things that are much better than you see today. Basically now, as you said at the beginning of the program, is, you know, good is bad and bad is good. And, you know, I'm not willing to sit back and just allow it to be. I'm going to continue to fight until I take my last breath. And then, by God's grace, hopefully the system will be better so that we can promote those values that we know really make the difference. And those values come from the most important book, which is the Bible.
Right. What is it? If my people are called by my name and they humble themselves, right, and I will heal their land.
That's.
But I think what's happening is that a lot of people are just kind of like not caring. Could care less. They'll care more about watching sports than really understanding. You know, who about how politics works and things like that, and who's running for. You know.
You know, sometimes it becomes very frustrating as a believer. You know, I've heard people say, "Well, you know, ultimately God's in control, and we know how it ends." But we're supposed to be busy. While,
you know why God knows how it ends? Because He knows what man chose to do. So that's why He was able to write the book to say this is going to happen, not because it was my will. It's because that's what I saw man do. Because He has a full picture, so He knows how it ends. So.
Well, I just think it's important, though, that again, we have to be active in the process.
Well, we're
And-
going to be
and-
held accountable,
Right, right.
you know, and I just think to myself, the politicians right now, the ones that are in higher up, I almost wish the fact that, well, I kind of say a prayer, maybe I shouldn't tell you what the prayer is, but anyway, you know, the thing is that they need to, one day they're going to have to answer to God, even if they don't believe, and even if the fact that they believe in a different God, okay, they will find out in the end who really was the true and living God, and they're going to have to answer them.
Well, you know what, that's really what it all comes down to. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, I am excited. There are a couple of candidates that are running on a national level that, you know, Dr. Carson,
Yep.
to me, for one.
Right.
Mike Huckabee, Governor Huckabee. They really are people of principle, and
What
there
about
are
Ted
a few
Cruz?
others.
What about Ted Cruz?
I think he's another one that certainly believes strongly in the
Yeah.
principles of the Bible.
Right.
And ultimately, I think what's critical here is that what we recognize that the most important thing we can do is to fight for what's real and true and stop allowing the enemy the ground.
Yes.
Because God's people have turned around
Right.
and allowed the enemy, and in certain times done things for what's personally beneficial to
Right,
them
right.
versus what's really
Sure.
beneficial to the kingdom.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing this today, and they can get in touch with you at myabba
728
728
at AOL.com.
at AOL.com. So I hope you get involved as well and finally take the step that needs to be taken in order to change the history of America, because right now, history of America is really, it's on the wrong course. So I also wanted to, again, just remind you, I do speaking engagements, so if your organization or church is looking for me to come and share my testimony, I would love to do that. So keep Inspired Blessings within arm's reach to help give you comfort when others are lost for words. Thank you, and God bless. www.jeanmarieprince.com. To accept and receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, please say this prayer. I know that I am a sinner who needs forgiveness. Jesus, please forgive me for all my sins and purify me. I know that you died and rose again to pay for my sins. I need you to be my Lord and Savior for the rest of my life. Thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible.
My life is in your hands. My life is in your hands. You took control when I was young, when I was not able. My life is in your hands. My life is in your hands. You took control when I was young, when I was not able. My life is in your hands. My life is in your hands. You took control when I was young, when I was not able. I had no mother to love me or a father to give me a hug. I was left all alone in this strange darkness. Nobody tried to claim me or said that they knew me. But Lord, you were always there, watching over me, making sure that I was fed. You kept me from the cold. Your hands picked me up and brought me to a loving home. Your grace was poured on me, and I was chosen to be saved.